Hi everyone, welcome back. Let's start the 42nd section of the Astik Parv of the Adi Parv. Sati said, and Shringan then replied to his father, saying, whether this be an act of rashness, O father, or an improper act that I have done, whether thou likest it or dislike it, the word spoken by me shall never be in vain. O Father, tell me thee, a curse can never be otherwise. I have never spoken a lie, even in jest. And Sameka said, dear child, I know that thou art of great prowess and truthful in speech. Thou hast never spoken falsehood before, so that thy curse shall never be falsified. The son, even when he attaineth to age, should yet be always counselled by the father, so that, crowned with different qualities, he may acquire great renown. A child as thou art, how much more thou stand in need of counsel? Thou art ever engaged in ascetic penances. The wrath of even the illustrious ones possessing the six attributes increaseth greatly. O thou foremost of the ordinance observing persons, seeing that thou art my son, and a minor too, and beholding also thy rashness, I see that I must counsel thee. Live thou, O son, inclined to peace and eating fruits and roots of the forest. Kill this thy anger, and destroy not the fruit of thy ascetic acts in this way. Wrath surely diseaseth the virtues of the ascetic acquire with great pains. And then, for those deprived of virtue, the blessed state existeth not. Peacefulness ever giveth success to forgiving ascetics. Therefore, becoming forgiving is thy temper, and thy conquering thy passions, shouldn't thou always live? By forgiveness, shalt thou obtain worlds that are beyond the reach of Brahman himself? Having adopted peacefulness myself, and with the desire also of doing good as much as lies in my power, I must do something. Even must I send to that king, telling him, O monarch, thou hast been cursed by my son of tender years, an undeveloped intellect, in wrath, had seen thy act of disrespect towards myself. Sati continued, and that great ascetic, observer of vows, moved by kindness, sent with proper instructions a disciple of his to King Parikshit. And he sent his disciple Gurmukha of good manners and engaged also in ascetic penances, instructing him to first inquire about the welfare of the king and then to communicate the real message. And that disciple soon approached that monarch, the head of the Kuru race, and he entered the king's palace, having first sent notice of his arrival through the servant in attendance at the gate. And the twice born Gurmukha was duly worshipped by the monarch, and after resting for a while, he detailed fully to the king, in the presence of his ministers, the word of Samika, of cruel import, exactly as he had been instructed. And Gurmukha said, O King of Kings, there is a rishi, Samika by name, of virtuous soul, his passions under control, peaceful, and given up to hard ascetic devotions, living in thy dominions. By thee, O tiger amongst men, was placed on the shoulders of that rishi, observing at present the vow of silence, a dead snake, with the end of thy bow. He himself forgave thee that act, but his son could not, and by the latter hast thou today been cursed. O King of Kings, without the knowledge of his father, to the effect that within 7 nights hence shall the snake Takshak cause thy death. And Samika repeatedly asked his son to save thee, but there is none to falsify his son's curse. And because he had been unable to pacify his son possessed by anger, therefore I have been sent to thee, O King of thy good. And that king of the Kuru race himself engaged in ascetic practices, having heard these cruel words and recollecting his own sinful act, became exceedingly sorry. And the king, learning that the foremost of rishis in the forest had been observing the vow of silence, was doubly afflicted with sorrow, and seeing the kindness of the rishi Samika, and considering his own sinful acts towards him, the king became very repentant. And the king, looking like a very god, did not grieve so much for hearing of his death as of having done the act to the rishi. And then the king sent away Gurmukha, saying, "Let the worshipful one, Samika, be gracious to me." And then Gurmukha had gone away. The king, in great anxiety, without loss of time, consulted his ministers. And having consulted them, the king himself, wise in counsels, caused a mansion to be erected upon one solitary column. It was well guarded day and night, and for its protection were placed there physicians and medicines and brahmanas skilled in mantras all around. And the monarch, protected on all sides, discharged his knightly duties from that place, surrounded by his virtuous ministers. And no one could approach the best of kings there. The heir even could not go there, being prevented from entering. And when the seventh day had arrived, the best of Brahmanas, the learning Kashyap, was coming towards the king's residence, desirous of treating the king after the snake bite. He had heard all that had taken place. That is, that Takshak, the first of snakes, would send the best of monarchs to the presence of Yama, death. And he thought, I would cure the monarch after he is bit by the first of snakes. By that I may have wealth and may acquire virtue also. But that prince of snakes, Takshak, in the form of an old Brahmin, saw Kashyap approaching on his way, his heart set upon curing the king. And the prince of snakes then spake into the bull amongst Munis, Kashyap, saying, Whither dost thou go with such speed? What beside is the business upon which thou art intent? And Kashyap, thus addressed, replied, Takshak, by his poison, will today burn King Parikshit of the Karu race, and that oppressor of all enemies. And I go with speed, O amiable one, to cure without loss of time the king of immeasurable prowess, the sole representative of the Pandava race, after he is bit by the same Takshak, like to Agni himself in energy. And Takshak answered, I am that Takshak, O Brahman, who shall burn the Lord of the earth. Stop, for thou art unable to cure one bit by me. And Kashyap rejoined, I am sure that possessed that I am of the power of learning, going thither I shall cure that monarch bit by thee. Section 43. Astik Parva Continued. Sauti said, and Takshak after this answered, If indeed thou art able to cure any creature bitten by me, then, O Kashyap, revive thou this tree bit by me. O best of Brahmins, I burn this banyan in thy sight. Try thy best and show me that skills in mantras of which thou hast spoken. And Kashyap said, If thou art so minded, bite thou then, O king of snakes, this tree. O snake, I shall revive it, through bit by thee. Sauti continued. That snake, king of snakes, thus addressed by the illustrious Kashyap, bit then that banyan tree, and that tree, bit by the illustrious snake, and penetrated by the poison of the serpent, blazed up all around. And having burned the banyan so, the snake then spake again into Kashyap, saying, O first of Brahmins, try thy best and revive this lord of the forest. Sauti continued. The tree was reduced to ashes by the poison of the king of snakes. By taking up those ashes, Kashyap spoke these words, O king of snakes, behold the power of my knowledge as applied to the lord of the forest. O snake, under thy very nose I shall revive it. And then that best of Brahmins, the illustrious and the learned Kashyap, revived by his Vidya the tree which had been reduced to a heap of ashes. And first he created the sprout, then he furnished it with two leaves, and then he made the stem, and then the branches, and then the full grown tree with leaves and all. And Takshak, seeing the tree revived by the illustrious Kashyap, said unto him, It is not wonderful in thee that thou shouldn't destroy my poison, or that if anyone else like myself, O thou whose wealth is asceticism, desirous of what wealth goest thou thither? The reward thou hopest to have from the best of monarchs, even I will give you thee, however difficult it may be to obtain it. Decked with fame as thou art, thy success may be doubtful to that king affected by a Brahmin's curse, and whose span of life itself had been shortened. In that case, this blazing fame of thine that hath overspread the three worlds will disappear like the sun when deprived of its splendor on the occasion of the eclipse. Kashyap said, I go there for wealth. Give it unto me, O snake, so that taking thy gold I may return. Takshak replied, O best of regenerate ones, even I will give thee more than what thou expecteth from that king. Therefore, do not go. Sauti continued, The best of Brahmins, Kashyap, of great prowess and intelligence, hearing those words of Takshak, sat in yoga meditation over the king. And that foremost of Munis, that is Kashyap, of great prowess and gifted with spiritual knowledge, ascertaining that the period of life of that king of the Pandava race had really run out, returned, receiving from Takshak as much wealth as he desired. And upon the illustrious Kashyapa's retracting his steps, Takshak at the proper time speedily entered the city of Hastinapur. And on his way, he heard that the king was living very cautiously, protected by means of poison neutralizing mantras and medicines. Sauti continued, The snake thereupon reflected thus The monarch must be deceived by me with power of illusion. But what must be the means? And then Takshak sent to the king some snakes in the guise of ascetics, taking with them fruits, kusha grass, and water as presents. And Takshak, addressing them, said, Go ye all to the king, on the pretext of pressing business, without any sign of impatience, as if to make the monarch only accept the fruits and flowers and water. And ye shall carry as presents unto him. Sauti continued, Those snakes, thus commanded by Takshak, acted accordingly. And they took to the king kusha grass and water and fruits. And the foremost of kings of great prowess accepted those offerings. And after their business was finished, he said up to them, Retire. Then, after those snakes disguised as ascetics had gone away, the king addressed his ministers and friends, saying, Eat ye with me all these fruits of excellent taste brought by the ascetics. Impelled by fate and the words of the rishi, the king with his ministers felt the desire of eating those fruits. The particular fruit within which Takshak had entered was taken by the king himself for eating. And when he was eating it, there appeared, O Shonak, an ugly insect out of it, of shape scarcely discernible, of black eyes and of copper color. And that foremost of kings, taking that insect, addressed his counselor, saying, The sun is setting. Today I have no more tear from poison. Therefore, let this insect become Takshak and bite me, so that my sinful act may be expiated and the words of the ascetic rendered true. And those counselors, also impelled by fate, approved of that speech. And then the monarch smiled, losing his senses, his hour having come. And he quickly placed that insect on his neck. And as the king was smiling, Takshak, who had in the form of that insect come out of the fruit that had been offered to the king, coiled himself round the neck of the monarch. And quickly coiling around the king's neck and uttering a tremendous roar, Takshak, that lord of snakes, bit that protector of the earth. Section 44. Astik Parv continued. Sati said, Then the councillors, beholding the king in the coils of Takshak, became pale with fear and wept in exceeding grief. And hearing the roar of Takshak, the ministers all fled. And as they were flying away in great grief, they saw Takshak, the king of snakes, that wonderful serpent, coursing through the blue skies like a streak of hue of the lotus, and looking very much like the vermilion colored line on a woman's crown dividing the dark masses of her hair in the middle. And the mansion in which the king was living blazed up with Takshak's poison. And the king's counselors, on beholding it, fled away in all directions. And the king himself fell down, as if struck by lightning. And when the king was laid low by Takshak's poison, his counselors, with royal priest, a holy Brahman, performed all his last rites. All the citizens assembling together made the minor son of the deceased monarch their king. And the people called the new king, that slayer of all enemies, that hero of the Kuru race, by the name of Janmejay. And the best of monarchs, Janmejay, though a child, was wise in mind. And with his counselors and priests, the eldest of son Parikshit, that bull amongst the Kurus, ruled the kingdom like his heroic great grandfather Yudhishthir. And the ministers of the youthful monarch, beholding that he could now keep his enemies in check, went to Suvantavarnam, the king of Kashi, and asked him his daughter Vapushamta for a bride. And the king of Kashi, after due inquiries, bestowed with his ordained rites his daughter Vapushamta on that mighty hero of the Kuru race. And the latter, receiving his bride, became exceedingly glad. And he gave in not his heart at any time to any other woman. And gifted with great energy, he wandered in pursuit of pleasure with a cheerful heart on expanses of water and among woods and flowery fields. And that first of monarchs passed his time in the pleasure of Puruvaras of old did, on receiving the celestial damsel Urvashi. Herself fairest of the fair, the damsel Papushamta, too devoted to her lord and celebrated for her beauty, having gained a desirable husband, pleased him by the excess of her affection during the period he spent in the pursuit of pleasure. Section 45. Astik Parv Continued. Meanwhile, the great ascetic Jaratkaru wandered over the whole earth, making the place where evening fell his home for the night. And gifted with ascetic powers, he roamed practicing various vows difficult to be practiced by the immature, and bathing also in various sacred waters. And the Munis had air alone for his food, and was free from desire of worldly enjoyment. And he became daily emaciated and grew lean fleshed. And one day he saw the spirits of his ancestors, head down in a hole by a cord of Virana root, having only one thread entire. And that even single thread was being gradually eaten away by a large rat dwelling in that hole. And the Pitris in the hole were without food, emaciated, pitiable, and eagerly desirous of salvation. And Jaratkaru, approaching the pitiable one, himself in humble guise, asked them, Who are ye, hanging by this cord of Virana roots? The single weak root that is still left in the cord of Virana roots, already eaten away by the rat dwelling in this hole, is itself being gradually eaten away by the same rat with its sharp teeth. The little that remains of that single thread will soon be cut away. It is clear ye shall then have to fall down into the pit with faces downwards. Seeing you with faces downwards and overtaken by this great calamity, my pity had been excited. What good can I do to you? Tell me quickly whether this calamity can be averted by a fourth, a third, or even by the sacrifice of half of my asceticism. Oh, relieve yourself even with the whole of my asceticism. I consent to all this. Do ye as ye please. The Pitris said, Venerable Brahmacharan, thou desirest to relieve us? But of foremost of Brahmins, thou canst not dispel our affliction by thy asceticism. O child, O first of speakers, we too have the fruits of our asceticism. But, O Brahman, it is for the loss of children that we are falling down into this unholy hell. The grandsire himself had said that a son is a great merit. As we are about to be cast into this hole, our ideas are no longer clear. Therefore, O child, we know thee not, although thy manhood is well known on earth. Venerable thou art, and of good fortune, thou who thus from kindness grievest for us, worthy of pity and great affliction. O Brahman, listen who we are. We are rishis of the Yayavara sect of rigid vows. And O Muni, from loss of children, we have fallen down from the sacred regions. Our severe penances have not been destroyed. We have a thread yet, but we have only one thread now. It matters little, however, whether he is or is not. Unfortunate as we are, we have a thread in one, known as Jaratkaru. The unfortunate one has gone through the Vedas and their branches and is practicing asceticism alone. He, being one with soul under the control, desires, set high, observant of vows, deeply engaged in ascetic penances, and freed from greed from the merits or asceticism, we have been reduced to this deplorable state. He had no wife, no sons, no relatives. Therefore, we hang in this hole, our consciousness lost, like men having none to take care of them. If thou meetest him, oh, tell him of thy kindness to ourselves. Thy pitris in sorrow are hanging with faces downwards in a hole. Holy One, take a wife and beget children. O thou of ascetic wealth, thou art, O amiable one. The only thread that remaineth is the line of thy ancestors. O Brahmana, the cord of Virana roots that thou seest we are hanging by is the cord representing our multiplied race. And O Brahmana, these threads of the cord of Virana roots that thou seest as eaten away are ourselves who had been eaten up by time. This root thou seest had been eaten half, and by which we are hanging in this hole is he that hath adopted asceticism alone. The rat that thou beholdest is time of infinite strength, and he, time, is gradually weakening the wretch, Jaratkaru, engaged in ascetic penances, tempted by the merits thereof, by prudence, wanting in prudence and heart. O excellent one, his asceticism cannot save us. Behold, our roots being torn, cast down from the higher regions, deprived of consciousness, by time we are going downwards like sinful wretches. And upon our going down into the hole with all our relatives eaten up by time, even he shall sink with us into hell. O child, whether it is asceticism or sacrifice or whatever else there be of holy acts, everything is inferior. These cannot count with the sun. O child, having seen all, speak unto that Jaratguru of ascetic wealth. Thou shouldn't tell him in detail everything that thou hast beheld. And O Brahman, of thy kindness towards us, thou shouldn't tell him all that would induce him to take a wife and beget children. Amongst his friends, or of our own race, who art thou, excellent one, that thus grievous us all like a friend, we wish to hear who thou art that stayest here. Thus ends the 43rd Parv of the Astic Parv of the Adi Parv. With this, we come to an end to this section of Astic Parv of the Adi Parv of Mahabharat. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, this is your host, Madhulika Rajohan, signing off. Stay healthy always. Narayan, Narayan.